Yontif Chag Sameach to my friends at BJ. It may sound a little bit counterintuitive to wish a good Yontif, but Yom Kippur is a great Yom Tov. It's actually a day of joy, not at all a day of sadness. And the joy is because we're celebrating forgiveness, Slicha. It's a wonderful introduction to a new year that allows us to really restart and renew ourselves. And in fact, it's very much connected with this question of Eileh Ezkerah that I want to discuss at this point. Many of you know that the poem Eleh Ezkerah introduces what we tend to call the martyrology. I think that's mistaken regarding Yom Kippur. The poem exists in 4 different versions, and 2 of them are recited liturgically. One on Tisha B'Av and one on Yom Kippur. The 2 are very different, night and day. And I'm going to read from both of them, and you'll be able to sense the contrast between the 2 piyutim, the 2 poems. The poem for Tisha B'Av begins as follows. Arzei Halvanon, Adirei HaTorah, Cedars of Lebanon, Masters of Torah. So it's introducing what we call the Asara Harugei Malchut, the 10 martyrs who were murdered, executed by the monarchy, by Hadrian. And it's part and parcel of the general pattern of Tisha B'Av memorialization for the martyrdom of Jews throughout the ages, the Crusades, the Inquisition, the Holocaust, up to the present day. And it's a day of mourning. It's a day of grief. It's a dark day. And the poem itself is a lament. It's a kina, part of the keynote. It continues, Arzei Halvanon Adirei Torah, Balei Treisim b'Mishnah v'Gemara, shield bearers in Mishnah and Gemara, Giborei Koach Ameleha b'Tohara, Damam Nishpach Kamayim, their blood is spilled like water, V'Nashta Gvura, and their strength sapped. Hinam, and here's the phrase, Kedoshei Harugei Malchut Asara. They are the 10 holy ones martyred by the kingdom. Va'al Eileh ani bochia ve'eni nigra. For them I cry, and my eyes flow with tears. So a lament, tears, specifically martyred. The dimension of martyrdom is that they were holy, the holy martyrs who were killed by the crown, executed. The poem that we read on Yom Kippur, however, I could not classify as a martyrology. In fact, it introduces slichot. It's a prayer for forgiveness. It's not a lament. Not that it's not sad to bring up the murder of 10 great sages, but it begins as follows. I mean, the language is striking. The difference is striking. Eleh Ezkerah v'nafshi alai eshpecha. These I remember and I pour out my soul within me. Kivala unu zedim, etc., etc. And tells a story about Caesar, about the emperor. And Caesar's rule, there was no deliverance for the 10 martyrs of that empire. What happened? Bilamdo sefer mepi mishulei areimat v'hevin v'dikdek b'dat reshumat. And it goes on in a poetic way. So the ruler was reviewing the books, our books, and he noted that there was an occurrence, an episode, where 10 brothers sold their brother into slavery. And there was no punishment exacted, at least in his configuration. And he calls the rabbis in and he says, it's time for you to pay. So this is not at all about, although, I mean, the subject matter is the execution of the rabbis. But the theme is your guilt. You need to atone. The blood is on your shoulders. You're guilty. And you carry the legacy of that guilt through history for betraying a brother. Wow. I mean, this is sort of critical. The Jewish people carry a memory of tearing themselves apart. What's new? Betraying one another. And that's what we bring to the fore in our prayers on Yom Kippur. It's as if the 10 martyrs, by the way, their sacrifices, they conclude the slichot, the avodah, right after the worship service of the Kohen Gadol. We no longer have any sacrifices. We have to gain atonement through our own behavior. So the rabbis were sacrificed here in the story, but really what it is, it's a metaphor for the fact that we need to go through a process ourselves of internal justification and atonement and acknowledgement for our history. Now the history and our personal and our personal relationships. In other words, the theme of Eileh Ezkerah is remember all the broken relationships in your life. Remember how you turned your back on one another, on family members. Remember the tragedies and your responsibility. I mean, it's a marvelous, I think, Jewish trait that we don't try to ply, or hopefully don't try to ply our victimhood. And we recognize our own responsibility. Because what it does is it gives us a chance for atonement and renewal. Because then we can really repair. And that's the theme of Yom Kippur. The opportunity that we have through the memorialization and remembrance, not to cry, but to rebuild. I think that's why it's a yontif, because we have opportunity. Salachti. It's as if God has said to us, reconcile with me. I will let you practice on the process of how to rebuild relationships in a state of purity, in an almost pristine environment of Yom Kippur, in your whiteness. And if you can learn how to approach and how to then also say Salachti, then you'll be able to rebuild with me and with those around you, and then with yourself, because we all have that need at times to let go and forgive ourselves and allow ourselves to begin anew. So rather than look at this part of the service as a martyrology, as a time to remember how we've been victims of history, the tradition really tells us, stop focusing on your tears and start focusing on your responsibility to rebuild your lives, rebuild your history, repair. There's even a sort of a sense of connection to the two goats that somewhere in our tradition we recall as relating to Jacob and Esau. These are fundamental memories that we carry with us, that our family was broken up. First Isaac and Ishmael. And that we need to spend our historical time, our experiential time, working on rebuilding those relationships to the point that we can say to one another, Salachti, we love you. And then we can attain the oneness that we all aspire for. We end Yom Kippur with a cry of Echad, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. The oneness of God should reflect and should inspire us to pursue the oneness in our own relationships, in our own circles, within ourselves. Tisku l'shanim rabot, may you merit many years, ni'imot v'tovot, pleasant and good, in good health. Take care.